Sefer Or, Dach Yomi, Amud Gimel. We started yesterday explaining. We started the Maimer Hein Amechad V'Saf Achas L'Cholbam V'Ata L'Yibatzer Mehem Kol Asher Yazmu V'Asois. That by the Mabul, after the Mabul, it came the Dor HaFlaga, that all the people in the world, they came together and they wanted to build a tower and rebel against Hashem. And Hashem said that if they'll succeed in their plan to unite in building this tower, then they'll get whatever they want. So we can't let them do that and get whatever they want, so we have to stop them. So the Alter Rebbe asks, what's the idea? Why would the fact that they're making this tower give them the ability to do whatever they want? Hashem is in control of everything. So why does Hashem sound like he's worried that they're going to take over if they build this tower? And also, why did they think that if this... What was the idea of building the tower? What did they want to accomplish with building the tower? So it says in Kisvei Arizal that the idea of building the tower, of coming together and building this tower, was in order to use Hashem's names to receive life and abundance from Hashem, even though they didn't deserve it. So you have to understand, what's the idea that uniting together to build a tower, what's that connected with using Hashem's names to get things they don't deserve? So we started off asking a question, explaining the idea of Hashem's names. We said that there's the Oros and the Kelim, that there's Hashem's, that in the world of Atzilus, there's Hashem's attributes, and Hashem's attributes, there's a way he unites with those attributes. That's called his light. And the attributes themselves is called the Kelim, how Hashem manifests himself in our world. And we said that in the Kelim, so all of the Kelim have a different name, that Shem Kel, B'Chesed, Shem Gevurah, Melukim. So the 7 names of Hashem are expressed in the different spheres, but the Or, the light, which is in all the Kelim, is from Shem Havaya. But by the Kelim, it's all a different name except for Tiferes. By Tiferes, which is a combination between Chesed and Gevurah, between kindness and severity, so the Kli itself is also Shem Havaya. Even the attribute of mercy, which is a combination of kindness and severity, that attribute is also called Shem Havaya. So you have to understand, why is that? So this is what we're trying to explain today. What's the idea of Hashem's names? And we're going to explain 2 levels in Hashem's names. That there's the way Hashem manifests himself to us through the world of Atzilus, which is called Shem Yediyah, a name that you can relate to. And then there's Leislach Shem Yediyah. There's a way that Hashem has a level that he reveals himself higher than we can directly connect to. And that's called Leislach Shem Yediyah, a level of Hashem that's higher than Atzilus, higher than Seder Shtalshlus, where you can't directly relate to that. It's like you don't know his name. So that's what we're going to explain now. Vishlahav and Masha Kasub. So on Yud Amud Beis, at the 3rd line from the bottom. Vishlahav and Masha Kasub Maimer de Pasach Chalihu Antu da Pikas Asitikun Vekrin and Hanas Sfiron. So it says in Pasach Chalihu, which is in the Zohar, we say on Erev Shabbos, that you took out these 10 tikkunin, which you called 10 spheres, which we're going to read and translate, because to explain every single point would take a very long time. So we're just going to read and translate, and then we'll explain. Chesed Jur Yamina Chulu, Chachma Moicha, Bina Liba Chulu. The kindness is the right arm, and Chachma is the idea of the brain, and Bina is the idea of the heart. Every sphere has its name that you could know. But you don't have a name that we could know. You are wise, but not with the wisdom that we could know. And you have understanding, but not with an understanding that we could know about. So we said before, in this Maimer HaZohar, first we said that Hashem has Chachma and Bina, and the Chachma corresponds to the brain, and Bina corresponds to the heart, or it's what causes emotions in the heart, meaning the heart, what's represented by the word heart, meaning the midas of Atzilus. So we said before that Hashem has wisdom, and then we said again that Hashem has a wisdom, but not the one that we can know about. In the second time that it says that Hashem has wisdom, it can't mean the wisdom which we know about, which that's Chachma Vatzilus, which is one of the 10 spheres. It appears because since he said between the first time Chachma and the second time Chachma that you don't have a name that we could know about, and then we said that you are Chakim, that you have wisdom, this means that it's a different kind of wisdom, that it's not the wisdom that's Chachma Vatzilus, but it's a wisdom Leislach Shem Yediyah. It's a wisdom that's higher than a name that we could know about. B'shemus lefi sfira shemeslabish ba k'mashka the part is shar shemus barichus ukenal shem kel b'chesed chulu. Whereas when Hashem's light comes into the 10 spheres of Atzilus, then Hashem is called by the name of that sphera, like it says in the Pardes. So in other words, there's Hashem's names that you could relate to, and then there's a way that Hashem reveals himself higher than you could call him by his name. For example, by a person that you see he's very smart, so you call him smart. Why do you call him smart? Because his smartness, his wisdom is revealed and accessible, so you can see directly his wisdom. So that's why it's a name that's accessible. It's a name that you can call him by. Whereas somebody that doesn't show any wisdom, he also has the power of wisdom. He also has the koyach hachachma in his nefesh, and it says that every nefesh has shleimus. So in his etzem haneshama, he also has the ability to have infinite wisdom, except it's not expressed in his mind and in the way that he acts. So you don't call him wise, even though he also has wisdom. So why is this person you call him wise and this person you don't call him wise? Because by the chacham, by the wise man, his wisdom came to be expressed in his brain and in his thought, speech, and deed. So that's like an accessible name that you call him wise. Whereas the other person that he also has the power for wisdom, it's hidden in his soul powers, and so even though it's there, but it's Leisach Sheb Yediyah. So how do you understand the difference between a Chakim that one's first we're saying that Hashem has wisdom, they're saying Hashem doesn't have a name that you can know. First we said Hashem is one, but not in calculation. In other words, there's one as in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's part of a series, a numerical one. Or you could say that Hashem is one, that he's one, he's a one that's higher than everything else. That there's only one, and it's completely different than everything else. It's one is singular and unique, which is completely different than everything else. That's called Chad V'la B'chushpan. V'afal gav da pikas asatikunin shemesa spheres to tikun atzilus asher called sphere hi b'china miyuchades mizulasa chachma chesed chulu. Imkin hava saka deitach shegam bo atzmas yish chaser sham gam kin b'chinas miyuchades chachma chesed chulu v'zeh mer sheinu kin ki b'chinas antu chakim hu v'la b'chachma yediyah. So what we mean to say is that even though since Hashem made 10 spheres of Atzilus, and in Atzilus all the 10 spheres are different and separate, so you would say that even in the source of Atzilus, in the Matzil, in the Insaif, there should also be these 10 separate aspects, and they're probably similar to the way that they exist in Atzilus. So therefore you have to say that no, that Hashem has the wisdom, the Chachma, the way that's in Atzilus, for sure it has a source in higher than Atzilus. It has a source in the Matzil, in the higher level, but the way that exists there is completely different. It's Lav Chachmi Yediyah. That is, we're trying to bring out the Ein Aroich, how incomparable Hashem's Chachma, Hashem's wisdom, the way that it's in Atzilus, there's the way that it exists in higher than Atzilus, in the Ein Sof, which that's called V'Lav Chachmi Yediyah. Return to Lamar. Ki chachma that is nikra chachma yediyah. Afa pishi gamkin bemes amayla mayla b'mahus chachma dibiyah mikam makom kivin shi makar v'sharish lahen nikris chachma yediyah v'hainu sheshamhu b'chinas kelim mamish chachma yeshla kli b'fnei atzmai bina bifnei atzmoi v'zeu daika b'esesris atzilus. That, what does it mean that Chachma v'Atzilus is called Chachma, that you can know, a knowable wisdom? That even though you can't directly know Chachma v'Atzilus from standing here in Asiya Gashmis, that even though in this physical world you can't directly know Chachma v'Atzilus because it's much higher than our understanding, but there is a connection and a relationship between Chachma v'Atzilus and our Chachma, between the Chachma v'Atzilus and Chachma Biyah. Because since Chachma v'Atzilus is or mislabish b'kli, it has a definition and a limitation, that it's this definable wisdom, and that definable wisdom is the source for the wisdom in the created worlds, in Bri, Yitzir, Asiya, and in us. So therefore, even though it's much higher, but it's not incomparable. It's not you can't say that there's no connection. There is a connection. There's a process from which, from Chachma v'Atzilus, you come to Chachma of Asiya and until our Chachma. Like you have a great scholar and a lesser scholar, and you have a simple person. So even though the simple person can't understand what the great scholar is saying, it's not that there's no connection between their type of understanding. It's just that this one is smarter than this one. But there's still a comparison, there's still a connection between them. So even though obviously Atzilus is a much more bein arech than that, but there's still a comparison, since it's the way that Hashem's Chachma is coming into Gvul. Avamad anto chakim hu lo b'chachma yediya klal ad she'esavas chachma d'Atzilus me'bechenas anto chakim v'al derech esavas yish miyayin v'lo b'chenas ila v'hol klal v'lo yal derech esavas chachma d'biyah me'chachma d'Atzilus v'zen yukar gam ki nishtalshelus sh'lekach nikris chachma d'Atzilus chachma yediya v'ech yediya el lefi she'chachma d'biyah nisava mimena al yedei hishtalshelus v'hi gilui v'yedua lekach gam chachma d'Atzilus nikra chachma yediya Kamoy al derech shenikra Adam d'Atzilus Adam d'Asiya. Mash'ein kein bechenes antu chakim hu la b'chachma yediya v'zeh nikra b'lashon hapardes es esfiras hagenuzis b'matzilan shal zeh amar antu chakim chulu. So this is the difference between the Chachma of Atzilus and the Chachma of Ein Sof, the Chachma of higher than Atzilus, of the source of Atzilus, which is called the Matzil, which is called Keser. That the Chachma of Atzilus is the way that it comes into Biyah. It's called Ila v'Olo, cause and effect. Meaning, from one level, it proceeds to another level. And so through a chain of levels, it's able to come down to us. So that's how, from Chachma of Atzilus, it comes to Chachma of Biyah and to our Chachma. So there is a chain-like progression from So there's a chain-like progression from the Chachma of Atzilus until it reaches our Chachma. Whereas the Chachma of Antu Chakim B'lo V'Chachma Yediya, this is completely higher and incomparable to the Chachma of Atzilus, and it's called Yesh Me'ayin. What does it mean, Yesh Me'ayin, something from nothing? Obviously it doesn't mean that it came from nowhere. It means that it looked like it came from nowhere because you don't see the connection between it and its source. That's called Yesh Me'ayin, that is completely incomparable to its original source. That's why the creation of the world from Elokos is called Yesh Me'ayin, because that a created being should come from an infinite creator, it's so incomparable, it's like it came out of nowhere. It's like, what connection? So the same thing, a limited Chachma, which is the source of the Chachma of Nivraim, is so incomparable to the Chachma of Ein Sof. It's like Yesh Me'ayin. It's like, where did this come from? So now the Alter is going to explain this idea, the way that it says in Kisvei Arizal, and it says 3 words: Nekudim. It says Akudim, Nekudim, and Brudim. So it says that Yaakov had these sheep. He was a shepherd and he had sheep, and so there were some sheep that they had rings around their ankles. Those were called Akudim. And he had some sheep that had like polka dots of black and white, and those are called Nikudim dots. And some had like these patches of black and white, and those were called Berudim, the patches of black and white. So Yaakov had these 3 kind of sheep. So what do these 3 kind of sheep teach us? So Kabbalah uses these 3 words as a mashal, as terminology to explain about Hashem's revelation in higher than Atzilus and in Atzilus. That we're going to say a mashal, the end of the Amud, the Alter is going to say a mashal between Kochas and Nefesh. That in a person's soul powers, so there's the revealed soul powers, there's the person has the ability to think and to speak and to act, and in his mind and his heart. So all those soul powers have a kli miyuchad, they have a specific place in the body where they're expressed. So they're expressed and they're all separate from each other. Whereas the soul, there's only one soul. And in the original source of all these soul powers, in the soul, they all exist as one. Because since a person's soul is only one, not 10, so in the soul, there's only one soul. And all the soul powers are just part of the soul. The soul has the power to do different things. So in the essence of the soul, there's only one pshit, just one simple essence. But from that one simple essence, it's expressed different soul powers until it comes into developed soul powers that are all separate from each other the way they're in the body. So there's this whole process of how from the simple essence of the soul it comes into the revealed soul powers. And similarly by Hashem, the 10 spheres of Atzilus, each of the 10 spheres are separate and developed and is doing something different in a certain sense. It's revealing Hashem in a different way, different attributes. So they're all separate and developed and expressed. But in the source and Hashem, so there's only one, Hashem is one. So then the source and Hashem, they're only one simple essence. That Hashem has the ability to express himself in 10 different ways. But the way that they're coming down from the simple essence of Hashem into 10 attributes of how he reveals himself, so they begin to divide up and to become more noticeable, and you'll be able to see that there are differences between these different attributes of Hashem. Just like in the soul powers, from the simple essence of the soul until it's expressed in the body, so the soul powers become more developed and revealed how there's differences between them. So that's the difference between Akudim, Nikudim, and Brudim. These are 3 levels of how Hashem's attributes are revealed. In Akudim, they're all Akudim b'kli echad. They're all existing together as one. Just like in the person's soul, all the soul powers exist as one, because he has one soul, so it's just the soul has the ability to do 10 things. So in Hashem, the way that it's in the level of Akudim, they're all existing as one simple essence. Whereas, in the world of Nikudim, we have 10 different points, 10 different dots, meaning that there is 10 different attributes of Hashem, but they're not fully expressed and developed how they're completely different from each other. It's just that Hashem has the ability for these 10 different things. And then in Atzilus, they're all developed as completely separate attributes that they work together, but they're separate attributes. So these are the 3 worlds of Akudim, Nikudim, and Brudim. So this difference between having a noble name and not having a noble name is also the difference between the Olamais of the Olam HaKudim and the Olam HaBrudim, between Hashem's, the spheres, the way that they're in their source, that they're all existing as one, or the way they're in Atzilus, that they're all expressed separately. So these are the inakudim. All the 10 spheres are bound together in one kli. They're all expressed as one at the same time, as one simple essence that has the ability to express itself in different ways. But in that level of akudim, you don't see any difference at all as 10 separate levels. Of nikudim, hu shenechel kol eser nikudos, in the world of Nikudim, which could be going on Arich, which is a level higher than Atzilus. Between Akudim and Atzilus is called Nikudim, which is going on Arich or on Taihu, but it's a level in between Akudim and Atzilus. So then there are 10 separate attributes of Hashem, but they're not fully expressed yet. Uvrudim hu are the matikun bechinas partzufim chulu. Right? Tikkun, which that's the world of Atzilus. So then they're called partzufim, face, personality. Personality means that each person has a whole set of intellect and emotion, his whole each person is like his own world. So Partzuf means that each of the attributes is fully developed and expressed with everything that comes with it. This is what it says. This is in the Zohar from Eliyahu Navi, that Hashem took out these 10 tikkunim, which is the 10 spheres of berudim. That just like in the sheep, they have the patches of black and white. So you have these big patches of black and white, and they're all mixed together, but still you can see black and you can see white. So the same thing, that you have complete parts of, you have a complete set of attributes of Chachma and Bina, but they're all working together. They're all Hiskalos, they're all working together in Atzilus, but nonetheless they also have their own identities that become united. Amnam Shorshim Akram Shahim Bechinas Akudim Harahim Bekli Echad Mamish Kol HaBechinas Chachma Bina Chulu V'hainu L'fi Shem L'mayla Memahus Bechinas Chachma Bina Hayaduim D'Atzilus. Whereas the source of the attributes of Hashem, the source is fierce, the way they're in Akudim. So the Bechli Echad, they all exist as one. All of these levels of Chachma Bina, all the 10 spheres exist as one, because the way they exist in Akudim is much higher than the way they exist in Atzilus. V'shavus Chachma Bina D'Atzilus V'yesh Miyayin Hainu Adei Tzimtzum Akvit Tzimtzum Adikna Ad Da'arech Ad Da'aba V'ima Yonkim Rak Mechenes Saras Chulu Mash Enkin Matzilus Abriya Einu Rak L'Adei Parsa Sheinu Me'erach HaTzimtzumim Melu Shebein Akal Atzilus L'chach L'chein Nikreis Hishtalshalus. And the difference between the spheres, the way that they exist in Atzilus and the way they exist in Akudim, is so be'inrach, so incomparable that it's like Yesh Me'ayin. It's like it came from nowhere. Like we said, that the creation of the world from Hashem is so incomparable that it's like it came from nowhere. You don't see the connection to its source. So the way that the spheres exist in Atzilus and the way they exist in Akudim is so incomparable. It's like Yesh Me'ayin. Like you don't see how it's connected. And which means to say that the tzimtzumim that Hashem had to make in order that there should be the 10 spheres of Atzilus from Akudim is much more than the tzimtzumim that Hashem has to make from Atzilus to Asiya. Hashem has to limit this infinite, simple oneness where all the spheres are united. Hashem has to make that from being limitless to being limited, 10 separate things. Whereas from Atzilus to Biyah, it's already limited. It's still a world. It's a much different kind of world, but it's still a world. And so to go from Atzilus into Biyah, it's not so much of a tzimtzum. You just need a parsa, you just need a curtain to block out all the big fancy light, so you should have only a little bit of light. But it's not a completely different type of setup. And since the spheres, the way they exist in Akudim, is so different and such a higher level than Atzilus, they're called Es spheres Agunus, the 10 hidden spheres. Hidden meaning they're inaccessible. They're higher than you can relate to because they're not Islabshus Bakli. They're not limited. They're not coming into a finite, limited form or of an attribute like in Atzilus. And so therefore, they're hidden spheres. V'yuvan al derech mashal. Ki hine kerchas hanefesh hameslabashim bever haguf harhim mischakim kol kayach mahus b'fnei atzmoi ve'ever miyuchad b'fnei atzmoi. So just like in a person, all the soul powers, the way that they're expressed in the body, they're all separate from each other. That each soul power has one place in the body that's expressed. That the ability to see is in your eye, and the ability to hear is in your ears, and the ability to act is in your hands. And also in the spiritual powers of the person, the ability to think is expressed in your brain, and the ability to feel is in your heart. All these different soul powers are coming from one soul, which is one simple essence. So how if the soul is one simple essence, then all these soul powers, the way that they exist in the soul, are also existing as one thing, just like the soul is one. So they all exist as one simple essence. So how do you understand that? If the ability to see and the ability to hear are two completely separate soul powers, So how can it be that in the way that they exist in the soul, they're one thing, right? They're two things. El avare mishum kishahayu bechinas kachas il benefesh him bechinas dakas vruchnis yosel ein shir mikashem achakach beguf achumri at sham him kol miyuchadim kilu him rak davrachad mamish. Because the soul power is the way that they exist in the essence of the soul. They exist in a completely different manner. They exist dakas vruchnis. It's only the ability and the potential for actual hearing and seeing. In other words, in your eye, you actually see a physical thing, and in your ear, you actually hear physical sound waves. Whereas the ability to hear and to see, the way that they exist in your soul, is only the power and the ability to hear and see. It's only koiches hanefesh. And so it's a much more ruchnis, much more spiritual, and less corporeal, less tangible. And so that's why it's able, all of the soul power is able to exist as one simple essence in the soul. And so the same thing, or similarly, the way that it's in Atzilus, that the 10 spheres of Atzilus, each sphere, each attribute has a separate kli, a separate attribute that's different than all the other attributes. But in their source, in the 10 spheres, in the essence spheres Hagenuzis, in their source and Akudim, so they exist on a completely higher level, where they're all able to exist as one simple essence. So Hashem tomorrow will continue with this idea.